Good evening, everybody. Hello and welcome to the Blockchain Institute webinar series. Tonight, we're honoured to have Anya Nova of Powerledger's Blockchain Development and Staking Operations team as our guest speaker. Anya will discuss proof-of-stake blockchain and sustainability, and she'll showcase some of the work Powerledger have been doing in this area recently. However, before we start, I'd like to introduce Typhon Karabagley, founder of Blockchain Institute Ireland. Typhon will give you a brief introduction to the Institute and its work. Typhon?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. The Blockchain Institute Ireland is founded in 2018, and we are raising awareness of blockchain, of distributed ledgers, and how these technologies are impacting on society today. We organize events such as tonight's webinar with speakers who are recognized as leaders in blockchain and encourage our speakers to share their insights, experience, expertise, how they are leveraging the technology to create value for their customers. In turn, we like our audiences to be engaged, and to that end, there are a couple of housekeeping rules. I will leave the word to Kevin. Thank you very much.
Introduce those rules. So basically, no doubt throughout Anya's presentation this evening, there'll be some questions that come to mind. Can I ask you to hold those questions to the end of the presentation where they'll be addressed in the Q&A, or alternatively, if you put the questions into the comments section on the screen, they'll be addressed at the end of the webinar. Secondly, your invitation email contains a link to a post-webinar survey. We'd be grateful if you can complete this survey after the webinar. Your feedback is invaluable to us, and it allows us to improve the events going forward. So that's the formalities covered for this evening. So now over to you, Anya, for the presentation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be a speaker today. So I'm going to talk about my two favorite topics, which is blockchains and sustainability. So can I just get a confirmation that you can see my slides? Okay, here we are. Excellent. So I'll just start off with the elephant in the room straight away. Critics often raise questions about blockchain potential negative implications for climate change, and that's mostly due to the high energy consumption of the Bitcoin blockchain specifically. Yet not all blockchains use a lot of energy, and we really need to talk more about blockchain technology's significant potential to accelerate climate action. So these are really the key takeaways from today's webinar, and we'll unpack some of the more interesting things in detail. So I'll briefly tell you about what Powerledger is and what we do, and then we'll talk about the blockchain energy usage. There are some myths around that. There are also benefits of blockchain to environment. Then I'll talk about something I've been involved in over the past year, which is the evolution of the Powerledger chain and the launch of staking, as well as what we do for sustainability. So Powerledger is a company that started in Australia 5 years ago. We're global now. We are in over 12 countries, and we are working with 30 enterprise customers. So those enterprise customers are power grid operators as well as utilities. So the software applications that we have deployed, the platform features, they work alongside the existing infrastructure for energy systems, enabling greater control and ownership for energy consumers and producers alike. So our clients and partners are getting ready for the new electrical world. And that new electrical world is a decentralized world where households and communities generate and store their own energy. And companies want genuine renewable energy, so we'll touch on that later as well. They also want renewable energy certificates, and they want them to be traceable to the source where they were generated. They want to know the provenance of every kilowatt hour that they use, and they want to be able to choose, track, trade, and trace what's going on a 24/7 basis. So do blockchains really use a lot of energy? Well, the answer is yes, if you look at the Bitcoin blockchain, but I think it's a bit of an unfair question because what are we comparing that to? So for example, research by ARK Investment Management found that Bitcoin ecosystem consumes less than 10% of the energy required for the traditional banking system. And should we really be comparing Bitcoin to banking because it's not really used as much for payment, or should we be comparing Bitcoin to mining? So I worked in mining for a period of time. Let's compare Bitcoin to gold mining. I mean, gold mining uses enormous amounts of energy. There are diesel generators on site, massive trucks moving a lot of dirt. There are processing plants. So the point that I'm getting at is that we can't pretend that there was a world before blockchain that we can go back to and say, well, all this extra energy that's being consumed, that's just too bad. Blockchain is here to stay. It's a very important piece of technology that we will be benefiting from in the future. So we need to be comparing it to existing technologies that it will augment or replace. Furthermore, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Bitcoin today, but I just wanted to touch on Bitcoin in basically 2 slides because it often gets criticized, and I think unfairly. So the second thing that Bitcoin is actually able to provide, or Bitcoin mining is able to provide, is to play a positive role in the energy systems. So miners, Bitcoin miners, can provide grid balancing and flexible demand response services and improve renewable integration. So that's already happening in some parts of the world. For example, there is surplus renewable energy that's being produced, and it's destabilizing the grid. So Bitcoin miners can quite quickly take up that excess renewable energy. We also recently basically learned that the New York is going to ban Bitcoin mining that's not using renewable energy. So still unclear about how that's going to go. Does it mean that the miners will move out of New York, or does it mean that the miners will just find better options for renewables in New York? But I think it's an interesting space to watch. And whatever your opinion is of Ripple, I think they have a fantastic tool on their website and a calculator that is quite interesting, which compares Ripple transactions to transactions in cash, for example. So you can see here that 60,000 transactions in cash, and I'm not 100% sure how they calculated that. They actually have a link to the methodology if you want to learn more. But 60 million, transactions in cash actually produce a lot more CO2, so a lot more emissions than a similar amount of transactions in Ripple. So again, my overall point here is that we can't just go, hey, blockchain uses a lot of energy. We need to be looking at, well, what are some of the comparable industries? How much energy are they using? And one of the advantages of blockchain technology is that it's not really a black box, as in we can't, we're actually able to see inside and calculate the amount of energy that's being used, and that's not the case for most industries. So it sort of opens itself up for criticism, when in reality, it's a big opportunity. And then, so if you think of Bitcoin as a Hummer, a big car, so you got to remember that not every blockchain is a Hummer. Most of them, proof-of-stake blockchains, for example, use a lot less energy. And really, the amount of energy used is a function of a consensus mechanism. So most of the listeners probably know the difference between proof of work and proof of stake, but I'll just briefly summarize that proof of work actually requires intentional computation, and those computational resources require hardware that consume a lot of energy. With the proof of stake protocols, they actually give a larger, they give those with larger cryptocurrency holding more power in transaction validation. So, and if that validator or a node is acting dishonestly, then they potentially get slashed. So the incentive here is to maintain and increase the stake and to act honestly. So, and I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I think there are different use cases. Some of them are more suitable for proof of work, and some of them are more suitable for proof of stake, and there are certainly trade-offs. So proof of work has been very effective in securing large amounts of value and large amounts of money for a long time. Proof of stake is relatively new, also has been successful in securing large pools of money. Some do criticize it for being more of a sort of the rich get richer, because to participate in the network, you already need to have a certain amount of tokens. But just to kind of give you a very clear view of what happens when you transition from proof of work consensus to proof of stake consensus, have a look at this graph. It's pretty fascinating. So we have energy usage on the left-hand side. So on the vertical axis here, gigawatt hours. And then orange is Bitcoin. So you see quite a high energy usage. Then Ethereum proof of work is a line in black. And then this is estimated, by the way. So these are not necessarily 100% accurate figures, but I think they're still worthwhile talking about. You can see here in purple, this is the estimate of Ethereum's energy usage once it transitions to proof of stake. And that line is barely visible. And that's because it's pretty much flashed with that 0 line here. So that's basically telling us that the projected energy usage of Ethereum once it transitions to proof of stake is going to drop by 99.95%. So that's very significant. But how do we actually measure blockchain energy usage? That's not as simple of a question as you might think, because there is a lot of tricky variables. So a common way of measuring the energy usage of blockchains is to look at energy per transaction. So to look at energy per transactions, we look at the number of servers or nodes or validators. We multiply that by the power per node or per validator that's being used, and we divide that by transactions per second. I think nothing is necessarily wrong with that calculation as long as you understand the limitations behind it. So, an obvious limitation, for example, is, well, if I want to run the most energy efficient blockchain in the world, what I can do is just to have one node. That one node, maybe it's a laptop, maybe it's 750 watts, and then divide that by a number of transactions. So that's going to be a very low figure. Of course, then, I can't really not any longer call that a blockchain. It's not a network anymore. And, I'm using an extreme example here of one validator, but you could sort of say the same about 10 validators or whatever that might be. So obviously we want a lot of validators. We also want a lot of transactions, because if a blockchain doesn't have a lot of transactions, well, it's potentially not getting utilized. And here is another nuance where are we talking about the theoretical transactions per second, or are we talking about the actual transactions per second that the network is experiencing? So theoretical transactions per second could be, in the realm of thousands of transactions per second, but maybe the blockchain just launched recently, so there is just not that many transactions. So the energy usage per transaction is going to be much higher. So really, when you use this metric, it's important to try to compare apples to apples. So potentially blockchains, public blockchains that maybe have been around about the same amount of time, with the same amount of validators, with the same amount of usage. So one of the companies that do provide quite in-depth information about the energy usage is Solana. So Solana publishes a pretty extensive, I would say, report on their website, and I recommend you check it out. One of the interesting things here is that they give you a comparison between a single Solana transaction, which uses 2,700 joules, and the single Google search, which is 1,000 joules. So technically, a Solana transaction uses less energy than 3 Google searches. And I don't know about you, but I do a lot more than 3 Google searches per day. So I think that's pretty impressive. And it also highlights sort of the importance of looking at the energy usage per transaction, but not sort of thinking that that's the only metric that's out there. Another way of looking at the energy usage for a blockchain would be per server or per validator. So that's, again, tricky, not straightforward. So it can range anywhere, from very little energy usage to high energy usage, depending on hardware that's being used and if any cloud nodes are being used. So you can see, for example, here Solana is reporting that their energy consumption per transaction has actually gone up from November last year to March this year. But then you can see that number of validators that have joined the blockchain have also gone up quite substantially, from 1,400 to 1,700. But what that sort of tells me is that, okay, so they probably onboarded more validators onto the blockchain than the natural growth in the actual transactions and the actual usage of Solana, a blockchain for whatever that might be, video gaming or supply chain, whatever applications are running on Solana. Also the energy used per transaction might fluctuate quite a bit depending on what kind of market we're in. So we're right now in the crypto bear market, so amount of transactions has probably declined. I would imagine trading has slowed down. So with trading slowing down, that would be more energy used per transaction. Then, so we've unpacked the energy usage for blockchains. And it's not just about the energy usage, it's also about the kind of energy that's being used. So is it dirty coal energy or is it clean renewable energy? And what's really given me a lot of hope and a lot of excitement is that we see a massive proliferation of carbon neutral blockchains. I'll just give you a few examples. And it's not just the fact that they're making a commitment to become carbon neutral. It's the fact that they are publishing or attempting to publish a very real reports and documentation that you can review on their website. So for example, here is Hedera. So Hedera has quite a comprehensive policy on their carbon offsets. And you can drill down and have a look for every quarter and all the carbon offsets they have purchased. So they go in pretty granular detail on the energy usage and the percentage renewables for their validators. Then another good example of that is Algorand, which have also made a commitment to become carbon neutral or even carbon negative, and they're working in a partnership with Climate Trade to help them offset their emissions and to sponsor climate change projects. Another example, of course, is Cardano, which has committed to using 100% renewable energy for their operation of stake pool service, which I think is really impressive and commendable. And of course, Powerledger is also one of the blockchains that have made a commitment to become carbon neutral. And so we've talked about both the energy usage and the kind of energy that's being used by blockchains. And now we can talk about what blockchains can do to actually accelerate climate action. So these are the news from today. So environmentalists sue Dutch airline KML for greenwashing. So I'll put a little screenshot here. What is greenwashing? So greenwashing is basically a form of marketing spin in which green marketing is used to deceptively persuade the public that an organization policies or the way they operate is actually greener than what it is. Greenwashing also sometimes refers to purchasing renewable energy or claiming that you're purchasing renewable energy that is not actually renewable. So I think it's very interesting because blockchain has an immediate applicability to this problem. Blockchain is a technology that is excellent at provenance tracking and traceability. So one of the use cases is, of course, traceability and provenance tracking of energy. And some of the key sustainability use cases for blockchains are listed here. So as I mentioned, supply chain, recycling, energy. So this is the space that Powerledger operates in. Carbon footprint, environmental treaties, nonprofits, and real-time incentives. And I'll touch on what Powerledger does. So Powerledger has launched 5 years ago, as I mentioned, and our flagship product was really energy trading and tracking. So in Perth, Australia, where I live, it was becoming really clear that with the declining cost of solar panels, a lot of households were opting for putting solar panels on their roofs. And then as those companies were basically using that energy and benefiting from their investment, they were learning quickly that they can't always benefit from the investment. Let's say the sun shines during the day mostly and they're at work, so all that energy is going back to the grid. And they're not actually able to sell that energy to their neighbor whose house might be in the shade, or maybe that person just doesn't have the funds to invest in solar. So that was sort of the initial thought that really sparked the creation of the Powerledger. And the idea here is that by establishing a way to trace individual energy usage and generation for households and give them an ability to trade that energy with their neighbors and facilitate a market price signal and a settlement mechanism for energy, we can do a lot of good, and we can create a market where market hasn't existed before. So with a peer-to-peer application, which is still our flagship product, you can actually set a minimum sell price for your energy, and you can set a minimum buy price, a maximum buy price as well. So that's applicable not just to households, but it's also really applicable to regions where energy community legislation has come into play, such as parts of Europe. And the second part of our business is tokenization of renewable energy certificates. So a renewable energy certificate is 1 megawatt hour of clean energy that has been generated. And it basically can be sold together with that megawatt hour of clean energy or separately. Those certificates can be surprisingly expensive, or they can range anywhere from $1 to $200 or $400, I believe. And the market for renewable energy certificates is growing as well, especially in the States and in Europe. So what we're finding is that there is a requirement and a need for increased transparency in this space. People want to be able to trade renewable energy certificates in a standardized way. They want to have a full traceability from the time that certificate was generated and location, the type of the solar asset, through the different times it has been sold and all the way to retirement. So we remove a lot of risks here by tokenizing those certificates and providing a marketplace for that. I think this can only be a very positive development. So tokenization of RECs and carbon offsets as well. And I think it will bring much needed trust into this space that has not always been as transparent as it could be. It will also bring ease of transaction and lower transaction fees. And the evolution of Powerledger chain is also really interesting, because we have been around for a long time, a lot longer than some of the other projects. And initially, when we started in 2016, we actually developed a proof of stake blockchain called EcoChain that has been used in various live trials in the energy market in 2016 and 2017. In 2017, Powerledger has run Australia's first ICO, and then have commenced the development of a proof of authority consortium Ethereum network. And as of late last year, we have launched a Powerledger chain that I will talk about more in the next few slides. So in 2021, we were observing the scalability and cost issues experienced by Ethereum users, and we were looking at the proposed solutions. A lot of them involved layer 2, for example, solutions. And it was becoming clear to us that in order for us to stay competitive, we really need to consider a very scalable blockchain. Reason for that being is that we work with smart meters, and smart meters are moving towards becoming real time. So where traditionally smart meters might be pushing data every hour, we started having projects where the smart meter data was pushed to our platform every half an hour, every 15 minutes, and in one case, even every 5 seconds. This is really great for the energy system as a whole, because you get a very granular view of what's happening and how it needs to be balanced. But it also means a lot of data and a lot of transactions. And having investigated layer 2 solutions, we really felt that layer 2 solutions probably have several issues that still need to be resolved before we can be fully comfortable using them. And we have decided to transition to Solana because it was offering the best scalability at the time, close to 50,000 transactions per second. And we also felt that the very approach to scalability was also pretty smart in where it's going to benefit from advances in processing chips and bandwidth overall. So with the launch of the Powerledger chain, we have also been working a lot in the last several months, and our community that followed our Telegram channel knows all about it, to introduce staking. Basically, proof of stake blockchains rely on staking to ensure security of the network. And this is something that we've launched on the 9th of June, so just very recently, less than a month ago. I'm very proud of our team who's done a lot of work to launch staking. And first of all, what are we actually staking? So we're staking a power token, which is a token that has been around for some time, is listed on Coinbase, Binance, Huobi, Kraken, Uniswap, on all the major exchanges. The interesting thing about the power token is actually an ERC20 token on Ethereum. And we decided to leave it there because of the basically the really widespread adoption that the token already enjoys. The power token right now, there is 500 million power tokens in circulation. As of today, the price is 21 euro cents. And with staking live, the staking APY is at 50%. So I'd say really attractive. And the minimum stake is 5,000 power. So a very important, if you're considering staking, to do it using only our official website. So there is no other place where you should be staking. You have to go to the Powerledger.io staking website and double check the URL. And we have built basically a bridge where a power token, which is an ERC20 token, gets locked up in a publicly visible contract. So currently there is about 10 million power tokens locked up. And then we bridge them onto the Powerledger chain, which is the Solana-based permission chain. And from there, that stake is actually involved in the securing of the chain with one of the validators. So it's delegated staking and then earning rewards. And the rewards are about 5 million power tokens per year. The reason I say about 5 million is because rewards are accrued every epoch, and epoch varies slightly, but it's usually around 2.5 days. So the security of the Powerledger chain and staking has been absolutely paramount for us. So one of the things that we were very focused on is to ensure that we launch staking that basically maintains and allows the user to have as much control of their funds as possible. So if you visit the Powerledger staking website, you will see that there are 2 buttons there to actually connect your MetaMask account or another Ethereum wallet you use, and to also connect your Solana-based wallet. So whatever that might be, Phantom, for example. And you have to sign all the transactions. So the transactions of creating a link between the 2 accounts, transactions of staking and delegating your stake. So that means that the main stake that the user has chosen to stake is always at the user's control. Additionally, unlike some of the other staking platforms or projects that you might have heard of, we're not actually minting new power tokens. So the power tokens have been created in 2017. There's 1 billion of them, so half of that in circulation. There is no more power tokens that will be created, so there is no dilution for the power token holders. Then it's a permission chain, so we're not a public chain. So it's not possible just for anyone to push a transaction onto the chain. We actually validate our validators, so we go through a process of due diligence, and it's obviously never 100% guarantee, but we have protections in place to make sure that the validators that we onboard are as honest as can be hoped for. Another part of staking is that we do withdrawal checks to ensure that there is no funny business going on. You probably have heard of a number of recent hacks and attacks, so working very hard to protect ourselves against something like that. So always keeping a close eye on what's going on in the ecosystem. Additionally, there are some withdrawal delays. So when you do withdraw power tokens, let's say you don't want to participate in staking anymore, you want to collect your principal and your rewards, there is a period there of 7 to 9 days delay, which is, some people might think it should be instant, but it's there for security reasons. And some other staking projects, for example, don't allow you to withdraw until a minimum staking period is served, which could be a month or several months or even several years in some cases. So in terms of sustainability of the Powerledger chain, so it really comes down to two factors. So it's the energy efficiency of the blockchain itself and how renewable is the energy that is being used. So on the energy efficiency side, we believe we are well positioned to be one of the most energy efficient blockchains. This, of course, is primary a factor of us being a proof of stake blockchain that's Solana based, so high throughput, low energy usage. We've also are working and have implemented some changes to the Solana code, which means that there are fewer transactions, voting transactions, that are going through, meaning that we require fewer CPU cores than Solana. So we have even lighter hardware requirements, meaning less energy usage. And on the renewable side of things, we are working with our validators to educate them on the importance of sourcing their energy from renewables such as solar, wind, and we're also making a commitment to become carbon neutral or carbon negative by purchasing offsets. So watch this space. As I mentioned, this is all really quite new and fresh, and we're very excited to, first of all, be working in the proof of stake blockchain space, be working very closely with our customers and our communities to provide energy solutions. And as a company for whom basically the sustainability is one of our core principles, we're obviously looking at utilizing all the benefits of blockchain, such as decentralization and censorship resistance, while being as green and as energy efficient as possible. And if you have any more questions or want to learn more about Powerledger or Power Token, then you can visit either CoinMarketCap and have a look at Powerledger there, or visit our website, which is probably the best place to learn about us. We also maintain a Telegram official Powerledger chat. Make sure that you join that chat, and of course exercise caution. We will never DM you for anything. You can follow me on Twitter or on LinkedIn as well. So thank you very much. And if we have any questions, I'd love to jump into them now.
Okay, thank you, Anya. That was very, very interesting. We'll open the Q&A session now to the audience. Is there anybody out there that's got a question for Anya? Okay, we've got one here from Vinu. Is the webinar about proof of stake being more environmentally friendly compared to proof of work? Or will there be a discussion on how blockchain can help in sustainability reporting for organizations, ESG dashboards, etc.?
If I'm kind of reading into that question, it sounds that Vinu would really like to learn more about how blockchain can help in sustainability reporting for organizations. So we can certainly talk about that as well. So this is sort of bread and butter of Powerledger. This is what we do. There's companies that sign up to various treaties or various sustainability goals. For example, RE100 is a pretty well-known organization. You can see a list of all the members on their website. So those companies tend to kind of operate on an owner system basis, where they report every quarter or whatever that might be, every year, on their sustainability targets and whether they reach them or not. Most of them have sustainability targets of, let's say, 2025 or 2030. Some of them go a bit further out to 2050. So what's always been missing for me in that reporting is that basically that granularity. And I always come back to this example of, I remember reading somewhere that if you took all the orange juice of the supermarket shelves and actually counted that, you would realize that there's not enough orange groves in the world. There's not enough oranges in the world to produce that much orange juice. And I feel like, that's just a gut feel that could be going on in the sustainability space as well. And that's what I alluded to earlier when I talked about greenwash. Potentially some of the RECs that are being generated might be double counted. Let's say a company might be purchasing renewable energy from a hydroelectricity generator, but that hydroelectricity generator is actually off-selling RECs separately into the market. So me, as a customer of that company, I'm claiming on my website that I'm purchasing green energy, green hydro energy, while at the same time, the greenness aspect of the energy is being sold elsewhere on the market. So I feel that by tracking megawatt hours and kilowatt hours at a granular level and timestamping them, we can alleviate a big part of that problem. So I hope that somewhat answered your question.
Thank you, Anya. We've read about the recent difficulties with the Solana blockchain. Is that impacting Powerledger?
That's actually not impacting Powerledger. So we're not on the Solana mainnet. And we actually have adopted a policy where we always 1 or 2 versions behind the Solana mainnet. Reasons for that is that if anything happens with Solana, where they might be out for some reason, or there might be some issues with their code, there were some emergency patches occurring on the Solana side, we're actually not affected by that. So we only upgrade to the new version of the chain once it has been in use by the Solana validators for a period of time, specifically to make sure that it's been well and truly tested before we take that up.
Okay, great. How are the recent bear market conditions in the crypto market impacting Solana?
Well, I can answer about how they impacted Powerledger. So Powerledger is actually well-funded. So we have done really well in 2017 through the ICO, and then the treasury has been really well managed. So we've kind of gone through that bull and bear market really well. So in terms of Powerledger, we're certainly not under any sort of threat here. We're here for a long run. In fact, we actively hiring. So when I started with the company, there was about 5 of us in the office, and I think we're now close to 65 in many different countries. And the company has a really good, thriving vibe about it. We're just looking at growth at this point. Okay,
thank you. Just one from myself, Anya. You mentioned about the in Perth, the consumers producing solar energy via solar panels. Let's say as the efficiency of solar panels increase, is there going to be a tipping point? Probably this question is outside of, let's say, Western Australia, because you get quite a lot of sunshine there, and the efficiency of the sunshine is actually quite powerful. Is there a tipping point where that model is going to become really mainstream? Is that related to the efficiency of the power generation, or is it related to the efficiency of the network that's built around the power generation, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I'm not an energy expert, but I'll answer your question. So I believe in some parts of the world, it's already more efficient to use renewables rather than the fossil fuels. Certainly in Australia, you correctly pointed out. However, it's not just about how much energy can be generated compared to the price of solar panels and batteries. It's about the ability of the grid as a whole to support that energy. So we certainly don't want an abundance of energy during the day with relatively low uptake because people are not even home. And then we don't want that lack of energy at night when people actually need it the most. So, and that's why, we see a lot of things like batteries coming into play. We're also looking a lot at providing an accurate price signal. So not, just generating as much of renewables everywhere, I don't think is a solution. It's generating renewables at the right amount of time and the right place. And, we see big players such as Google, for example, where they have gone from a commitment to just being renewable over a period of time across all of their locations to now making a commitment to being renewable for every hour of the 24-hour cycle at each individual location, which I think is a very inspiring move and very important, because you can't just be sort of 100% renewable because you've produced lots of renewables in a place where it's easy to produce them, and you haven't produced any in a place where it's difficult to produce them. And you don't want to be 200% renewable at 3 p.m. and then 5% renewable at 7 p.m. and then just sort of average it out. So I don't think that's the future. So I think a lot more depends on the orderly integration of renewables into the grid rather than just the capacity of the solar panels.
Okay. Is hydrogen likely to impact your business model?
Oh, I'm actually going to pass on the hydrogen question. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Okay. Is there any other questions from the audience? Okay, we've got one here from Katie. There are not enough offsets in the world for every company to use them to reduce their emissions. What are these blockchains doing long term to reduce absolute emissions? Are there any companies setting science-based targets with SBTi?
To reduce so there are not enough offsets in the world for every company to use them to reduce their emissions. What are these blockchains doing long term to reduce absolute emissions? So, well, the biggest reduction in emissions will occur from the transition from proof of work to proof of stake. So that's, I think, answers your question, as in the total amount of energy is going to shrink dramatically. So I'm certainly not suggesting that blockchains should just be using offsets. And I think there should be a reduction in the total energy usage, together with the growth in the number of useful transactions that are being used by blockchains. So I hope that answers your question. I think it's a very fair question, but I think that same question should be asked of the banking system, of the mining system, of aviation industry. I really recommend Googling carbon neutral blockchains and having a look at the reports that they put out on their websites, both on the quite detailed energy usage and also the number of offsets they have purchased.
Thank you, Anya. Here's a question from Andrea. Yes, we all proof of stake is not wasting energy. The real question is achieving decentralization.
Well, that kind of speaks straight to the one of my first slides where I said, well, the best way to become a most energy efficient blockchain in the world is just to have like 2 nodes, right? So that's not very decentralized. So it's obviously, that's not a solution. No one wants that. The reason we value that technology is because it provides immutability and decentralization. So I think some PoS blockchains claim they are more decentralized than proof of work blockchains. There is something that's called a Nakamoto coefficient, I believe, which means how many nodes can you corrupt before the blockchain is not able to either produce transactions or arrive at a consensus. And I think that number, I've seen that fluctuate from very few for proof of work blockchains like in Ethereum to actually quite a lot more for some proof of stake blockchains. And the higher the number, the better. I mean, that's I can't give you a definitive answer on that. I think it's really a cat and mouse game, because as blockchain technology is kind of exited that peer-to-peer space and became more of a business, right? Those validators and those miners, they run in large businesses. I think there is a natural tendency towards centralization. They just tend to have the buying power for the hardware. They tend to have the bargaining power for energy. They tend to just have the right connections. And I think it will be a constant fight and a constant attention that we need to maintain on the decentralization and why we all fell in love with this technology in the first place.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. Okay, another one here from Andrea. How many entities control 51% of the Cardano network? How many Solana?
I don't know about, I don't know, I'll have to look it up. So that's, I believe Solana publishes that. They have a Solana Beach validator dashboard. So again, Powerledger, we're not on the public Solana mainnet. We're on the permissioned Powerledger chain. So we don't keep an eye on that. We just care about our validators and onboarding our own validators. This is really the #1 priority for us now. But with Solana, it's really easy to do. You just open the Solana validator dashboard and you look at all the percentages. And as soon as that totals up to 50%, you can count the number of validators.
Okay. Have we got any? Okay, here's one from Peter. So my question is therefore, how does going carbon neutral using offsets differ from going carbon negative? And from which form of the two of these makes sense in order to make real change? He continues, and does this mean that the other is greenwashing as it has been described?
So, carbon neutral is just basically offsetting your fossil fuel consumption or any energy that hasn't come from renewable sources. And carbon negative just means doing that plus more. So there is not a fundamental difference there in methodology or way of thinking. It's just the differences in scale. So I wouldn't call one greenwash and the other one not greenwash. Both of them do rely on purchasing the right kind of offsets for the right location and in the right time in which that energy has been consumed.
Okay. I hope that answers your question, Peter. Okay, here's a question from Shahil. Just one more question. How safe is the proof of stake when compared to proof of work?
Well, I think proof of stake is really safe, but I'm biased. I think the best answer for that is really market capitalization for individual blockchains. So if you just look at coin market cap and you look at your top 10, which ones are proof of work, which ones are proof of stake. So proof of work certainly have a longer history in being safe, if you want to call it that. But I think proof of stake, I think they're designed really well. So if I'm staking my tokens, if I'm delegating my tokens to a validator, I certainly want that validator to perform well. That validator wants to perform well because if they perform well, if they don't miss transactions, if they don't try to pass fraudulent transactions, they actually get paid. And if they don't do that, not only are they not getting paid, which everyone, in crypto spaces tends to kind of chase a bit of yield and they certainly want rewards, but in some instances, they even getting slashed. So that's a pretty painful penalty, slashing. So that's losing your principal. So I would say that's a very effective mechanism for protecting proof of stake networks. I suppose I just wanted to touch on something that's not exactly, I think, what this question is about, but it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine because I've come across quite a few projects that call themselves staking, and it's really not staking. It's a kind of yield generation. Not necessarily anything wrong with that if kind of people treat it for what it is, which is a bit of a game or a bit of a way to make some money as long as you know when to exit. But it's basically staking into a smart contract, which just generates more of the same. And then chasing that yield, and when enough people stake, you might get out. But it's not actually doing anything. It's not actually securing a blockchain and securing the infrastructure. So there's not an inherent use case there. And knowing how easy it is for blockchain developers to program whatever they want to program, they can program any yield they want. And that's why people got used to some sort of astronomical figures there. So I would, if people hear about some scams associated with staking, it's really important to kind of ask yourself, well, is that associated with proof of stake blockchains or is it associated with some staking project?
Okay, thank you. Katie has another question. How is Powerledger working to combat the issue of the rich get richer for our proof of stake? Yeah,
it's a good question. So I don't know if we landed on a perfect solution yet, just because that is that's the trade-off between proof of work and proof of stake. We do have a limit of 5 million tokens per validator. So once that validator has hit its limit, they can actually offer another node. So that's an opportunity for other nodes to come into the and play basically and offer stake into our community. So what we wanted to avoid, we didn't want a large exchange that might hold a large number of power tokens to just spin up a node, and that's going to suck all of the rewards that we have made available. We really wanted to put a cap on that so that whales are not the only ones that are participating in our ecosystem. And what that also does is that we hope that it will create more decentralization in the long run, and also it will create more competition between the nodes. So on our proof of stake blockchain, if you go and just have a look on our website and our staking page, you'll see there's nodes that are offering anywhere from 0% commission to 2% commission to 100% commission. So obviously don't stake with 100% commission nodes because you won't be getting rewards. But again, it's a free market. So we wanted to make sure that there is always a bit of tension between the nodes where they offer really competitive services to power token holders who want to participate in staking but don't necessarily want to learn the technical skills that are required to run their node.
Thank you. Here's a question from Simon. How does using renewables account for carbon neutrality when the renewables you're consuming could be used more efficiently elsewhere? Is there a specific offset calculated for that?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever heard that question before, and I'm trying to sort of figure out where it's coming from. So it almost sounds like, why use renewables for blockchain when those renewables could be used elsewhere, like for transportation or supply chain or whatever that might be? I presume that's the question, but I could be wrong. And that kind of goes back to how I started the presentation, where if we compare blockchain usage to the times before blockchain, well, that's not going to get us very far. That's kind of like going, well, didn't we use less energy before aviation? Yeah, we certainly did. But who wants to give up, flying right now and seeing their family and friends or going somewhere for work? Well, no one does. So blockchain is absolutely here to stay. My personal belief is that it's part of an essential infrastructure, an essential financial infrastructure. So we need to treat it as such. So it's going to consume some energy, and that's normal and that's good. And we want it to consume energy, and we want the benefit that it offers us and the use cases that it offers us to be more, and contribute more to the society than the amount of energy that it consumes.
Thank you. Hopefully that answers your question, Simon. Have we got any other questions? Oh, we have. Raul is here. He's on LinkedIn this evening. How incorporating smart meters with blockchain can help us in increasing the carbon offset and help organizations bring more transparency to it?
Well, so I don't necessarily, I wasn't saying that the smart meters will help us increase the carbon offset. What I was saying is that having energy transactions and renewable energy certificates on blockchain will create the provenance for those certificates that we really need. So just to give you sort of a sense for renewable energy certificates, in some places, they have been basically printed on paper, and that's what the certificates look like. And people would exchange those certificates with each other. So as you can imagine, you have a certificate with maybe a serial number, and then you take that certificate, you buy it from somewhere, and then you claim that against your sustainability goal, or you say, well, I've done my job, I've met my legal target for renewables as a corporate, for example. And then those certificates became entries in databases. And those databases, there's quite a few of them scattered around the world. They're not necessarily treating the certificates the same. They're not necessarily standardized between themselves. So if I'm a large energy user and I need to buy those carbon offsets or renewable certificates, I might have to be working with multiple registries and transacting between them. So it becomes a bit of an administrative nightmare. Plus, I at some point, I might lose the ultimate trail, and I'm relying on auditors to verify those certificates. So tokenizing anything that is highly tradable, that is of high value, and that is important for the environment, I think is absolutely essential. I believe most things will get tokenized in the next 5 years. And I just think that renewable energy certificates and carbon offsets are a low-hanging fruit. So they will be tokenized. They will be one of the first.
Thank you. Have we got any more questions? We have. Raphael is here. Raphael's on YouTube this evening. How do you validate or check a blockchain is utilizing sustainable energy if all goes to the same electricity network from everyone taking energy from where everyone takes energy from?
Okay, so I think this question is potentially about kind of miners and validators. So let's say I'm a validator of a Powerledger blockchain, and I'm located in some country like Germany or whatever that might be, and I'm just actually plugging my hardware into the grid. So I know that the grid is 30% renewable in Germany, for example. I don't actually know the precise figure. So then I know that that validator in particular is 30% renewable, and then some other validator located, let's say it's a cloud, a Google Cloud node that may be in Iowa, which has a very high percentage of renewables, and Google Cloud publishes that data, might be 93% renewable. So that's kind of like a way of figuring out what each validator is bringing to the table for a particular blockchain. And then it does require quite a bit of reconciling of that information and making sure that it's accurate. Although it is very much possible to do that. However, in some instances, such as, for example, Bitcoin mining pools, it's a lot harder because they might be providing compute power to the general pool, and then that Bitcoin is getting mined. So it's very hard in that instance to actually be able to clearly say if that Bitcoin is a green Bitcoin or not a green Bitcoin, because multiple miners contributed a lot of resources to get that particular Bitcoin mined.
Thank you. Rupesh has a question. Do Powerledger works as grid forming mode market for isolated microgrid also?
We do work with microgrids. And to learn more about that, I would actually point you to our website. We have a list of all the projects that we're currently involved in, and some of them are microgrid related. You can also contact our business development and sales team. They can help you understand more about the services that we offer for microgrid and microgrid operators.
Thank you. Andrea has another question. If I may have one more question, of course, wouldn't it be fairer to have a network in which one node equals one individual instead of having one node equals one hash rate proof of work or one node equals one stake proof of stake?
I see. It's more of a kind of governance model as well, right? Because we, yeah, well, it's interesting, right? But if you saying that it's one individual, one node, you're kind of presuming that those individuals want their identity known. And most people in blockchain crypto space value privacy really highly. So they don't necessarily want their identity known. Whether or not that's a more fair way of doing things, well, you could say that it's more decentralized, but let's say I'm an early participant in the network and I've supported that network when no one else believed in it. And as a reward for being an early participant, early believer, I have accumulated quite a lot of tokens of that project. And surely, at that point, you feel that it's fair for that person to have an advantage in terms of staking because they have actually risked, taken a bigger risk early on in the project. Plus, anyone whose wealth is tied up to a particular token or particular project will be less likely to sabotage that project. So they would be more likely to act as an honest node. So I guess the answer here is that I see Andrea's point here, but I'm also just offering a couple of counter arguments.
Thank you. Pranay is here. So won't the main security challenge for Powerledger come in when you scale up to allow retail providers of solar energy to sign up to your platform? And with the potential decentralization of solar infrastructure itself, how do you plan to work towards that?
Well, I'm not sure if that's necessarily a security challenge. It's certainly a scalability challenge. So that's what we've identified as one of the priority projects for us last year, and that's what we've been executing. So we've been working not just on scalability of the blockchain, but because Powerledger uses basically a suite of technologies, machine learning, blockchain, as well as more traditional applications that we have developed, we actually have to look at scalability across all of these. And I know our team that offers the peer-to-peer energy trading has been looking at scalability really closely and continuously running tests to make sure that they can support basically scaling at a very high level. So we have a number of customers now that we think will be bringing on quite a number of retail users and quite a lot of smart meters, and we're preparing for that.
Okay, thank you. Have we got any more questions?
Right on the dot.
I think that might be it. Okay. Well, thank you very much this evening, Anya. That's been very, very interesting, certainly from my perspective. It's given me some food for thought. I'd like to thank you for your time this evening, for the knowledge that you've given, that you've passed over to us. We've really enjoyed it. If I can just remind the people here at the webinar, if you could just please complete the invitation, the survey, the post-webinar survey, that's included in your invitation email, that'd be fantastic. So with that, then we'll close this evening's webinar, and we look forward to seeing you for the next one. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks. Thank you.